Welcome back. In this module of the Freedom Ticket, I want to talk about some common mistakes that new sellers often make. The most common mistake that they make is they're afraid to pay their supplier. They're afraid they're going to get ripped off. If you recall from one of the earlier modules, that's not the intention on the vast majority of Chinese manufacturers and suppliers. They're very honorable people for the most part. But a lot of people say, look, I want to pay by PayPal. I want to have some sort of recourse. Most of the suppliers do not take credit cards. They want a wire payment. Some of them will take a Western Union. I don't recommend you doing Western Union for a big order. For some samples, it's okay. But a lot of people, they want to pay by PayPal, and they insist on paying by PayPal. And that's okay for some samples or a very small order, but for your big order, you don't want to pay by PayPal. That's a sign of an amateur. Number one, it's almost offensive to the Chinese, because in China, they get hit with about a 4% penalty when you pay by PayPal, and a lot of these guys have to wait extra time to actually get the money. PayPal holds it for a while, and so they really don't like accepting that. So it's kind of a sign of disrespect when you insist on paying for a big order by PayPal. If you're really worried, you can use like Alibaba's Trade Assurance or one of the escrow services, or even like services like Ping Pong or some of the other payment services. If you're using those for cross-border payments, can actually handle the payments for you. But it's okay to wire money. If you do need to wire money, there's services. You can use your local bank. They might charge you from $20 to $50 depending on your bank. You know, like Chase, if you have a business account, sometimes a couple international wires are included for free. Or you can use services like TransferWise, which will actually do an ACH of your account and will transfer the money at a favorable rate, and you can actually save quite a bit that way as well. So those are all reliable and a good way to pay. So don't insist on paying by PayPal, or don't always insist on doing escrow, because that's just a sign that, especially on a small order, you know, a few $1,000 or $5,000, it just kind of gives away that you're a small fish, and you're going to probably be treated accordingly by the supplier. The next thing that you want to make sure you do is you don't neglect your compliance. Neglecting compliance, it can be a major problem. You know, sometimes these factories will give you documents that will say that we're certified for UL, or we're certified for CE, or whatever the requirements are, but you got to verify those documents that they're actually legitimate and they're actually for your product. Otherwise, you can get flagged. And if you're not sure what are the rules for importing my particular product, and you might be surprised if you go to thetradelane.com, you can punch in what you're selling, and it'll show you what are the requirements for importing in the US or importing into Europe. And you can actually see exactly what you need to do and what certifications are necessary. It's your responsibility. It's not your factory's responsibility. It's ultimately your responsibility. And another thing you have to remember is that everything that's coming from China that's sold in the United States has to say made in China on it. You actually have to have that actually on the product. It's usually on the box packaging. They'll say made in China, and usually on the actual product somewhere, it also needs to be on there. If you don't do that, or then you're opening yourself up to having your goods confiscated or having a heavy fine when you import them from customs. So make sure you have that made in China, or if it's made in Taiwan or wherever it's made from. Even that applies to if you're bringing stuff in from Europe. I've had stuff in the past that I sourced in Europe, brought into the United States, and I didn't have that was made in the United Kingdom, for example. And the customs in Houston held the product. They said they were going to dispose of it unless I paid like a $3,000 fine. So I had to pay a $3,000 fine, and then actually agree to actually put the made in the United Kingdom sticker on everyone and take a picture of them and show it to them. So it was a pain in the ass. So make sure you go and you have all your compliance done. So another rookie mistake that's common made is not sourcing your freight forwarder. You know, in some cases, it's actually better to let your Chinese supplier actually ship to you, because they get preferred rates coming from China to the United States. Sometimes if it's under $2,500 and they can ship by DHL or FedEx or UPS, they actually may be able to save you some money, even if they mark it up a little bit over you using your own account. There's a bonus section if you look further down in this section, and where there's a whole series of special in-depth trainings from Unicargo, who's one of the big freight forwarders out there, that will go into more detail on some of the stuff on how to actually choose a freight forwarder, whether you choose them or choose somebody else. But you want to make sure you source around. There's a lot of different freight forwarders, a lot of different options of people that can help you bring in your goods in. So if you can source if you're importing in the U.S., you want to make sure they have a U.S. office. So source them from the U.S. Or if they're not based in the U.S., that's okay, but at least they have a U.S. presence and a U.S. office. There are some freight forwarders that are based in China and their only office is in China, and they may have a little bit lower rates. But if you run into a problem and they don't have a U.S. based office, that can cause some extra paperwork and some extra hassles for you. So make sure they actually have an office based in the country you're importing. If you're importing into Europe, make sure they have a European-based office as well. And so that's really important to source around because the rates can vary. The shipping rates may be similar, but the fees that the freight forwarders charge can vary. Now, freight forwarders are mostly needed for sea shipments. So if you're sending something, what's called DDP, and we'll talk about terms in another module, but if you're sending something that's called DDP, that means duty and freights paid. So those are like normally your smaller shipments like UPS and FedEx. And a lot of times you don't need a freight forwarder for those. You might, in some cases, need a customs agent, but usually those things are handled by FedEx or UPS or DHL, that whole customs process on those smaller orders. But a freight forwarder can handle all your sea shipments for you. So make sure you look around and find a good freight forwarder. The next thing you don't want to do is you don't want to really show your size. If you're a one-man or a mom-and-pop operation working out of your house, that's okay. But you don't really want to let the Chinese suppliers know this because you want to appear as big as you can. Sometimes when I'm negotiating with them, I'll actually even write in the email and I'll say, I got to check with my boss I'm just the purchasing guy. I got to check with the marketing guy or with the vice president or something to see if this is okay. And I'll just make that up, even though it's not a vice president. You always want to make sure you look like you're bigger than you are, because otherwise they might try to take advantage of you in pricing or push you down the list. And be careful about asking things that you don't know. So if they tell you a term or, we're going to send this EXW, you're like, oh, what the heck is EXW? Don't ask them. Just say, okay, let me check on that and see if that's okay. If you don't know what that is, then come back to the course or post on one of the Facebook groups like the FBA High Rollers or something and get the answer to that. That way you don't look like you're a novice to them, because if you start asking them to explain how things work or some of the terminology, it's a sign that they may be able to take advantage of you a little bit in pricing or in some other way. So you always want to make yourself look a little bit bigger than you are. Another common mistake is that you don't have specific and clear communication. You have to remember that English is not the first language of most of the people that are in China or India or wherever you may be sourcing from if it's not the United States. So always try to use very succinct and short words. Sometimes phrases or colloquialisms don't translate very well, and they won't quite understand it. So you always want to be very, very clear in all your communications. If you're telling them, I want this to be blue color, don't just say, okay, please, I want a blue mirror. You need to actually go in and tell them specifically which blue. You can go online. There's something called the Pantone, Pantone coloring system, or PMS, Pantone matching system. And there's numbers for every single color. So you can go on and you can actually specify, I want a Pantone color 162, which is like a navy blue or something like that. Be very specific because English is not their first language. Keep sentences short. Don't do big, huge, long emails. And always, what I like to do sometimes is even ask questions. That way, instead of just writing a paragraph, I'll actually put everything in like 5 questions. And I'll put number 1, boom, boom, boom. And then number 2. And that way, when they respond back to me, if they skip a question, I can say, I'm sorry, can I get the answer to number 3? Maybe they didn't understand it, or maybe they just skipped over it. But that way, it's perfectly clear communications. And also remember that a lot of times that they like to see face-to-face, so you could use Skype. They also like WeChat. So if you're not on WeChat, you're going to want to download that on your mobile phone. You can also use it on the desktop, but you're going to want to download that on your mobile phone because that's their preferred method of communication. And you can have a whole channel of everything in there, and you can upload pictures and all kinds of stuff. So WeChat is preferred. Some other places in the world might use WhatsApp, but for China, it's mostly WeChat. Another thing that you want to always do is make sure you negotiate your payment terms. Now, at first, you're not going to have a lot of wiggle room because you're brand new, and so you're probably going to have to do the 30% down and 70% to when it's ready to ship. But after a while, you can actually start negotiating those, and maybe it's 20% down and 30% when it's ready to ship, and 50% when it lands at the port in Long Beach or LA or wherever it's going. or something even better. Remember, these guys want to work with you. We've talked about how to get some better terms in one of the other modules, so go back and refer to that. But always try to negotiate those terms after you get a relationship. It's a little bit difficult in the beginning, but once you have a relationship, it can be a lot easier, and especially if they think they have a good working partnership with you and you're going to grow together, they're often interested in that. Another thing is handling defects. You know, it's actually illegal to actually ship defective products back to China. So if you receive a bad batch of products and you want to ship them back and have them replace them, it's actually illegal to do that. What you always want to do is, like I've talked about in another module, is negotiate your defective items by taking pictures of them and sending them a video, or sending them pictures, or sending them reports from Amazon that show this is how many were returned, and try to negotiate that up front so that they'll replace those on your next order. Another common mistake is don't expect that they're going to have Western customs. You got to remember that there's these guys, and most of the people in China are working what's called a 996, and they work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Oftentimes Saturday is a work day in China. Only day off they get is Sundays, and even some of the managers and stuff will still work on a Sunday, at least a part day. So when they have holidays, it's a really big deal. The biggest one of all for them is Chinese New Year. It usually occurs in late January to sometime in February. It's a 2 to 3 week period. Now your rep might be only gone for like a week at that time, but the factory workers and stuff are usually gone for 2 or 3 weeks. And you got to keep that in mind when you're ordering, because if right after Christmas in the US you might be out of stock, you're like, okay, I need to get some more stuff in for February and March, but there's a 2 to 3 week window there where nobody's working. Even UPS and FedEx and everybody shuts down out of China. Nothing moves except the trains and the people. And so it can be a problem. You got to keep that in mind. So you kind of got to get ahead of it. So you got to be thinking, like in October or November, what am I going to need in January or February, and get those orders in before they close down for the new year. Because when they come back from the new year, they're often backlogged, and there's a whole backlog and can take longer to get stuff out. And so always keep that in mind. Another thing is shipping rates typically go up in the fourth quarter. So by air or by sea, the rates are often a little bit higher in the fourth quarter. So if you can get ahead of the game a little bit, keep that. That can save you some money. Or just be if you have placing some big orders in the fourth quarter, expect some of your shipping costs to go up over what they might normally be. Another common mistake is that you don't verify your factory. We talked about this in another module. It only costs a few $100 to get a verification report and to do a little bit of homework and due diligence on the factory, just to make sure that everything's okay. And always have a backup plan in case something goes wrong. You know, a lot of people like to source 2 factories, and they'll actually split the stuff up. Maybe not on your first order, but once you get going, and if you're starting to move a serious amount of volume, you actually might want to have a backup factory. And so maybe you're selling and you're ordering, selling something that's selling 100 units a day. And so you need 3,000 a month, and you're ordering 6 or 10,000 of these at a time. Some people will actually split them between 2 factories. They'll say 5,000 to this factory and 5,000 to this factory. Or they'll have a backup factory that's standing by in case something goes wrong. It could be anything from a factory's just slow to they have a flood, or one of their box supplier doesn't come through, or who knows what. But you never want to be caught with your pants down. You always want to make sure you're prepared. Another thing is, in the beginning, people always ask about packaging. I need to find a packaging factory, because Kevin always says that you need really good packaging. In the beginning, I probably wouldn't worry about finding, unless it's very, very specialized packaging and very, very unique. I would not worry about going out and finding a separate factory for your packaging. You can find them at the trade shows. You can find them online that do specialize in packaging. But in the beginning, I'd probably, when you're doing smaller orders, just let your factory. They have relationships with different packing companies. Let them do that. Yeah, it might cost you slightly more, but that's okay on those small quantities. Another thing on packaging sometimes is you want a special type of packaging, and the factory will say, sorry, you're only ordering 1,000 units, but we have to order 2,500 of these boxes in order to get the price fair. Otherwise, it's not doable. And sometimes I'll just say, fine, order the 2,500 boxes. I'll pay you for the 2,500 boxes. You use the 1,000 of them for my order, and the other 1,500 of them, just keep them in your warehouse, and we'll use them on the next order. So don't let that be a stumbling block either. But in the beginning, I usually let the factory kind of help job out the packaging. And then once I get big enough and start moving a significant quantity, then I might actually look at a separate packaging company, have them make all my packaging and ship it to the factory. Another thing is you will always want to use an inspection company. We talked about this in another module in a little bit more detail, but never let a shipment leave China ever, under any circumstance without going through an inspection. It doesn't matter if it's the first order or the 100th order you made from this factory. Everything needs to be inspected up front. And always tell your supplier up front that you're going to do an inspection. Tell them in the purchase order that we're going to make an inspection, and it has to meet these certain requirements, certain number of major defects and minor defects, and it's called an ACQL level. And you want to make sure that you are within those levels, and if it doesn't, they got to replace the parts, and they got to pay for the reinspection. And don't always focus on the price so much. Some people are always just nickel and diming, and they're just trying to cut corners, and the lowest price doesn't always necessarily mean the best deal. It could mean inferior quality. It could mean a lot of things. So sometimes it's worth paying a little bit more of a premium price to get a premium quality and premium service. A lot of times we're talking about a nickel or a dime or a quarter. It's really not going to make a huge difference in how much profit you make on the books, but it could make a huge difference in how much money you make long term, because you're going to have a better quality product that's going to get better reviews, and that's going to hold up better and not have people saying this thing only lasted a month and it fell apart. So sometimes price is important, but it's not everything. I always say the money is made in the sourcing, not in the selling. And when I say that, doesn't mean that the money is made in the cheapest price in sourcing. It's made in the relationships. The price does factor, but the quality also is a huge thing. So you have to find a balance here. And there's another module here where we talk about a tool. There's a website that's a Chinese-only website called 1688, and I'll show you how to kind of verify to see if you're getting at least your prices in range. I give you a specific example from one of my previous products, and shows you how that in case you're sourcing on Alibaba or you're sourcing somewhere else, you can just kind of verify that you're getting a fair price. So take a look at that as well. So those are 12 rookie mistakes that a lot of people make. And so I just want to point those out, and so that you can hopefully avoid some of these common mistakes, and that'll help you get a better deal and better relationships and have a much smoother operation as you're starting your business. We'll see you in the next module.